Hey guys, so I just watched Christopher Nolan's Odyssey, and before we dive into my thoughts on the movie, there are something I want to clarify. First of all, I have never read the book of Odyssey, so my opinions on the movie are strictly coming from someone who learned the story from the movie itself. The only previous knowledge I have is the movie Troy, and funny enough, I decided to watch that film just an hour before going into Odyssey, and even now, I'm not sure if that was the right move or not, but maybe we'll talk about that later. So the short version of this review is that I did not think Odyssey lived up to my expectation. And before you guys go ahead and insult my intelligence for saying something like that about a Christopher Nolan movie, I do want to say I am a fan of Christopher Nolan. I think it is very difficult to deny this guy's ability as a filmmaker when he has literally made movies like these. So when I see people on the internet talking shit about him as a director, they all just sound like haters to me. I'm sorry, but this guy literally has a resume that looks like this, and you're gonna tell me that he's an incompetent director? That being said, even though Christopher Nolan is probably one of the best directors of our time, he is not perfect. Although I did find Odyssey to be an entertaining film, there were still so many flaws that I just couldn't unsee. So let's start with the things that I like. The most memorable part to me was definitely the camera work and the visual tricks used in the movie. I feel like Christopher Nolan truly mastered so many visual tricks and took the term movie magic to such a high level with the Cyclops scene, the giant soldier scene, and the scene with the pigs. I don't want to spoil the movie, but if you know, you know. That was truly impressive. They kind of reminded me of the Lord of the Rings movie behind the scene footage that you would see on the internet, like just raw camera tricks. And that's always so fun to see. And those scenes I mentioned really tell you how knowledgeable Christopher Nolan is with his craft, that he can just flex so comfortably. And speaking of the Cyclops scene, the design of the Cyclops was perfect to me. Like, how original. From the look of it to the sound of it and even the way it moves, just so uniquely terrifying. And if you listen to Christopher Nolan talk about the design of the Cyclops, you can tell everything you see during that scene was intentional. And I always have to appreciate scenes like that when everything feels so intentional and works so well. And I might be one of the few people, but I was actually fine with the pacing. Despite this movie being long as fuck, I feel like every scene there was a story to be told. Whether that story was well told or not, that's another issue. But every scene served a purpose. And as a lead up, it worked so well because the payoff of the story, the third act climax, was actually so exciting to me. Like, I was on the edge of my seat and having so much fun. And I think that's where Christopher Nolan shines the most. It's how the story is told. Like, every part of the movie was unique in its own way until the end of the movie, where everything just comes together and you see his overall vision. Now let's talk about the things I didn't like, because despite being an entertaining film, this movie was far from perfect, especially for Christopher Nolan's standard. The most notable flaw of the movie, and no, the internet is not lying.
For once, the gossips were right.
This movie was extremely miscast. I don't think I've ever seen a movie with a casting this big to be so miscast. Despite having so many A-list veterans, most of them really didn't bring their characters to life. At one point of the movie, I was wondering if Tom Holland, Zendaya, and John Bernthal were even good actors at all. But then 2 days later, I saw Spider-Man Brand New Day, and yes, I can tell you they are great actors. They're just, ironically, they did so much better with their character in a Marvel film than they did in a Christopher Nolan film. And no wonder now people are saying how Christopher Nolan is not an actor-director, which I still don't know if I believe that, because despite this movie having no memorable character, he had still brought multiple iconic characters to our lives. Characters so amazing that it started a whole new culture. And speaking of miscast, let's just get the Lupita Nyong'o's Helen out of the way, because ever since the trailer dropped, this seems to be the biggest talking point of the movie. The way I see it, this version of the Odyssey is definitely a more modern take of the original text. So I see this movie as a reimagined version of the Odyssey, and there's nothing wrong with that. And that being said, there is no problem with Helen of Troy being black. And if you think otherwise, there is a word for people like you. But that being said, I still believe Lupita was a little miscast. I believe that you should always cast someone who looks the part. And Lupita Nyong'o, while being on the more attractive side, she did not convince me of Helen, who is a woman with the beauty that would start a war that eventually led to the fall of a whole kingdom. But at the end of the day, everyone in the movie except for Robert Pattinson and Anne Hathaway and maybe, a very big maybe, Matt Damon was miscast in the movie. And another very memorable flaw to me was the costume design and the character design. Now, I know I just praised the shit out of the Cyclops design, but there were parts of the movie like the Trojan horse and the Agamemnon's armor truly horrendous. It was so bad, and some of the characters just straight up looked like the actors who were playing them, but in a Halloween costume. And it was so apparent that these actors were not given cohesive acting direction throughout the whole movie. So it was very difficult to be immersed with the story when I couldn't even see the characters these actors were playing. All I see was Matt Damon, Tom Holland, Zendaya, Anne Hathaway, and Charlize Theron. And I remember there was a scene towards the end where someone was beating Tom Holland up, and I was like, bro, you may as well just start shooting webs, because they didn't change his hair, they didn't change his makeup. It was literally just Tom Holland in a Halloween costume speaking with his American accent. It was such a weird decision, and I don't understand why no one said anything during the process of making this film. And then this is not really a surprising flaw, but since it's a Christopher Nolan movie, the audio was still so fucking loud. The people on the internet are not joking about this one. There were parts of the movie where I literally had to cover my ears, and it was so uncomfortable. And there was a scene where they were on the boat going through a storm. The flashes during those scenes was crazy. It was unacceptable. It was literally giving me a headache to a point I thought I was gonna throw up. But I guess Christopher Nolan considered that immersive, so maybe it was intentional that I was supposed to get motion sickness with the people on the boat. But maybe I am stupid, but I really couldn't bring myself to enjoy or appreciate those scenes. It was physically painful to experience. So all that being said, I still think Odyssey was an above average film. It is hard to watch it and not have fun, but it is not an epic film. I feel like despite all the hype around it, this will be a Christopher Nolan film that in no time no one will be talking about. And now I want to talk about the movie Troy real quick. Because like I mentioned before, I did watch it an hour before watching the Odyssey, but unlike the Odyssey, this movie was actually better than I expected. I started watching Troy fully expecting to see a movie which glorifies war and violence, but much to my surprise, as the movie progressed, it started to make you question if the Trojan War was even necessary. The story really captured how all these men eventually took on the path which led to their end for reasons like power, religious belief, legacy, ego, love, and honor, and these values which they found worthy of dying for served as a prison that made them incapable of backing away from something they know will kill them. And ironically, the female characters in the movie, who I thought was 100% going to be sidelined because this was an early 2000 action war movie, actually served as human and relatable characters. And throughout the movie, they made some really strong arguments which challenged the necessity and the glory of the Trojan War. And this message was actually presented early in the movie by Achilles' mom when she told Achilles, you can either choose not to fight the war and live a peaceful and happy life but die as a nobody, or you choose to fight the war, not live through it, but die as a hero whose name will be carried on for a generation. And this question actually tie into another conversation that was in the even earlier part of the movie when the kid told Achilles he wouldn't fight the biggest person he has ever seen, and Achilles told him,
that's why no one will remember your name.
So throughout the movie, they never lost the essence of this debate, regardless of how long this fucking movie was, and that actually impressed me so much. On top of that, the action was also top-notch. Like I mentioned before, I'm not all that familiar with the Greek mythology. All I know was that Achilles was supposed to be one of the best fighters, but I always thought he was one of those force of nature, unstoppable, brute force kind of guy. But the choreography of this movie really presented Achilles as someone who is so quick, experienced, and precise. It was so convincing that every move he made could be deadly if you're not careful. And in the sense of comparing to the Odyssey, the costume design was way better in this movie, and the design of the Trojan horse was way more believable in this movie, and the dialogue was 1000% better in this movie.
I love my boy from the moment he opened his eyes till the moment you closed them.
I
dad is coming home.
And if the story wasn't so plainly told and poorly paced, I would say Troy was a better movie. Because while the casting was enormous in the Odyssey, I would not describe this movie as epic, but I would use that word to describe Troy. Some of the scenes were so grand that I had to Google whether they used CGI for the war scene. And even though they did, they still managed to hire over 1,000 extra just to capture the battle. But I guess the Odyssey still had the Cyclops, the pigs, and the giant soldier. So at the end of the day, these two movies are very different, and it's not that productive to compare the two films. As the quality of the movie, they both have their goods and their bads in their own way. But you can also like both or neither. No one's making you choose. I liked both for very different reasons, and that's just where I stand. And that's all I had to say about the Odyssey and Troy. Bye.
Somebody get these beggars out of here!